What's up, and welcome to Nowstalgia Lists, Nowstalgia Rankings, however you want to put it. This is Pat Sheehan, joined by my trusty co-host Dave Martin Swagger. Dave, end of year is upon us. How you feeling about 2022 in music?
God did. No, I'm feeling good.
Yeah,
Nostalgia best of kicking off in music for us. TV, movies also on the way. Stay tuned for that. YouTube.com/nostalgia pod. But yeah, man, good music year. Feeling good. Definitely a better music year than last year. Happy to get into it.
yeah, we have a lot to get to. We're going to be ranking our best albums of 2022 as well as our best songs, and maybe even a few disappointments and some K-pop discussion as well. So again, hit that subscribe. If you're watching this and you are checking out our best albums list, check the link below for our best songs list, and vice versa. If you're watching our best songs, check the link below for our best albums. Check both of those out and leave your thoughts on youtube.com/nostalgia pod. Before we jump into it, Dave, I mean, just right away, how did you feel about music this year?
Yeah, felt good. Felt good. A lot of stuff I liked. A lot of big names dropped, which is always fun and exciting. We talked about this last week with Spotify Wrapped, but in terms of like the music industry, the musical year, not a lot of new stars at the very tippy top. It was a lot of pre-established A-listers maintaining status when you look at like the global streaming data. Artists that didn't even release new music this year were still dominating. And there's a lot of things that go into that, but that is something to pay attention to moving forward. But I still think there was a lot of excitement of the new releases, which I'm happy to get into.
Yeah, for me, I was really surprised to see how many albums I was able to just like be like, oh, I really loved that one, really liked that one. When I got to the songs list, I had a harder time picking out like what were really like the best songs this year. I feel like for me, there were a few really popular songs that stood out, and I was like, maybe I'll maybe those make my list. But it was just so much easier to say like a lot of really strong overall projects, but maybe not those like singles that I'm gonna be just like going back to over and over. At least that's my first impression. As I've been listening more, I'm like, man, there's just a lot of good music, a lot of really talented artists out there this year. We're gonna be jumping into the albums first, and I wanna give you the floor. What's your number 10 album of
So my number
2022?
yeah, my number 10 album of 2022 is an album we did not review in the podcast, an album I got to several months after the fact. I believe this came out earlier in the year. I didn't listen to it till around September, and that would be Houston rapper Mike Dime's second album, In Dimes We Trust. Something that came out of complete nowhere for me. I saw a lot of love for it, having not yet listened to it earlier in the year. He was a name who came up with XXL Freshman, hadn't been selected. And I was like, let me check this guy out. We know Houston has been hot, obviously, with someone like Megan the Stallion and, underground people like Maxo Cream. But there's this new Houston face. Interesting. Let me listen to it. And I was like, just really blown away with just how hard I thought Mike Dimes raps. Like this shit just goes. There's just so many joints on this that I love. Home, paparazzi, back room, no trends. Like he just goes so hard. He has such like confident flow, and the beats just like really hit with this like hard hitting like bass drum and stuff. Like I would definitely recommend people check it out because he's still a under the radar artist for sure, but someone I'm really invested in now. So Mike Dimes, In Dimes We Trust, number 10.
Dave, you talked about last a couple weeks ago actually how your Spotify Wrapped was the the Explorer or like the
Yeah.
on the
Um,
Verge guy.
right, exactly. Whatever it
What
was called. The tastemaker or something. I don't know.
Yeah, and this is why, because you're full of surprises. You have your finger on the pulse of these artists that aren't necessarily we're reviewing every week, but you're always doing the homework and bringing you surprise albums like this. Mikey Dimes, Dave's number 10 album of 2022, and now I'm going to tell you mine, which is that yesterday's price is not today's price. It's Almost Dry by Pusha T, coming in at number 10 for me. I mean, just when you
Number
think
5 for me.
number 5, hell yeah, great album. Just when you think Pusha T can't keep rapping about the same shit anymore. He just finds a different way to repackage it, and it sounds fucking awesome every time. And on top of just making this album with so many songs that stand out, from Brambleton to Let the Smokers Shine the Coops, Diet Coke, Hear Me Clearly, like so many songs. You get probably the last album where you can really listen to Kanye and be like, I listened to that before he was totally canceled and didn't like him anymore. You get the last Kanye and Kid Cudi song on here, so that's a
Definitely the
relic
last of
right
that.
there. So, and you get a Malice feature. You get Malice. Maybe we're gonna get a Clips reunion. How could you not put this on a top 10 list of this year?
I think exactly how you said it is exactly right. Where Push, 10 years in as like a mainstream soloist, the second pillar of good music, people know the story at this point. He still finds a way to keep your attention with the familiar subject matter. The pure snow we sell in white privilege is just the most amazing thing he's ever said. Like I can't get enough of it. But to like deliver a album that's 50% produced by Pharrell, 50% produced by Kanye West, and both of them really delivered, really showed they're the two sides of their production styles. Obviously, they're both very different, but that was sick. And yeah, I think like you said, the suggestions of the future, a reunion with Malice, a Clips album, comeback album, perhaps very tantalizing. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like it's more Pusha T, but he just is always just so good and so entertaining
Mhm.
that that's what makes him one of the best whenever he drops.
Yeah, and he doesn't really shy away from like the darkness of what he's talking about on this, but he's still able to package it in a way that I think is very palatable. And you even get a song like "Call My Bluff," right, which is like so different from him. He's like registered up a bit. He's kind of like in this like laid back type delivery throughout it, and it's just like he's finding new ways to continue to like grow as an artist, even this far in, even if he's not necessarily finding new lanes. So I really appreciated this, and just can't recommend it enough. If you didn't listen to this rap album this year, get to it for sure. Dave, what's your number 9?
My number 9 is Sudan Archives, Natural Brown Prom Queen.
Very nice. I had Sudan Archives coming on my list as well. At number 7.
Awesome. Yeah, I think this is another album that definitely caught both of us by surprise. We were not up on her prior to this record. We saw the love for it, caught up to it a few weeks later. And I think it's just one of those classic examples of a really confident artist with a really clear vision delivering something that's really like multifaceted, in this case jumping across multiple genres. You have when your singer is also playing violin on the same album. Like, I think there's just so many qualities and so many like surprising moments across the whole album that I think it was one of the most unique things I heard this year.
Oh, completely. I mean, oh my God, Brit, they're gonna lose they're gonna have a fit when they hear this shit. It's absolutely incredible how she was able to span so many genres. I mean, there's obviously hip hop and R&B infused on this, but she raps. I mean, the song I just referenced, oh my God, Brit, she's rapping
Mm,
pretty much the whole time. She
heard
has
or so.
funk on this. She has some really like sexual songs. She's all over the map, and it all sounds really great. I think my only like critique of it would be a little long, a little bit bloated, but for an artist who's still like fairly young in her career, I don't not going to deduct too many points from that. And I think just her ability to take her vision and take all these different genres and find different flourishes for each little thing. The beginning of the album is probably my favorite, where you have Homemaker, NBPQ, you have Oh My God, Brit, Selfish Soul, like a bunch of just like bangers right off the top. But as you get even further down, songs like Milk Me, Freakalizer, Do Your Thing, Refreshing Springs, like just there's songs all over this that, and it's varied, but it all still feels so cohesive. Really impressive album.
Yeah, totally. Really hard to compare to really anything else this year.
Absolutely. So my number 9, one second, is the Beth's expert in a dying field. Dave, how does it feel to be an expert in a dying field? Well, the Beths are going to tell you all about it on this excellent album. The Beths were
Podcasting, not a dying field. We're
no
good.
podcasting is fucking strong, bro. Um, the Beths
Nice pick.
after their first album, we were very all in on them. And the second album, didn't really hit. So
No.
we were I wouldn't say we had high expectations for Expert in a Dying Field, but it's like a true return to form for them, and I feel like even a level up for the Beths. From their like ability to craft these songs that not only feel like pretty true to rock, and you can call us alternative, but there's moments on this that are just pure rock. Like there's some really strong guitar solos on the back half of some of these songs. In some songs they're kind of calling back to like the Cranberries in terms of sound. Some of them even sound like the Ramones at times in terms of what they're going for. So there's a lot of like rock elements all over this, but just like the stickiness of some of these choruses and some of these melodies is just really, really impressive. And for my money, and if you want to like say what was like the most like pleasurable rock album you listened to this year, I'd probably say the best, just because it's one of those ones that's like feel good for the most part, and just delivered on all cylinders. The band was firing completely, and I just really enjoyed it. And when we first reviewed it, this came out earlier in the year. Well, not earlier in the year, only a few months ago, actually. September feels longer ago. I wasn't sure that this was going to make my list, but as I was going through, it just felt like I couldn't leave it off. So really, really pleased to have the best back in their usual form. Dave, you're number 8.
Number 8 for me, Charli XCX Crash, an album that I wasn't sure if it was going to make my list when I first heard it, because this was the Charli album that probably was the least surprising, or at least like openly surprising compared to her past track record, the standard she has set for herself as this uh, genre pushing pop artist that's pretty well established at this point. We've talked about her past work. But the more I thought about it, I was like, it is just like, I think, really cool that Charlie XCX also has an inner still to make a quote conventional pop star pop album as her last album on her Atlantic Records deal, an album or a record deal she had for like almost 15 years. And like just the fact that it's like this not so subtle middle finger to her label. It's like, hey, you see all this like conventional, like more mainstream appealing stuff? I had that in me the whole time, but I just don't like
Yeah.
making that shit. So, suck it. And I still just really dig a ton of these songs. I think a big part of this was I did see this tour, and seeing some of these songs live really helps with that. But I mean, right off the jump with Crash, I love Good Ones. The lead single is really engaging. But I think for me, like songs like Baby and Yuck, just really, really sticky. And even songs that, like, on the surface, like, they didn't, like, impress me because, like, the star power of the guests didn't match my expectations. Songs like New Shapes with Christine the Queens and Carolyn Polachek, or
Mm.
Beg for You with Rina Sawayama, being a little bit further removed from like my initial feelings of those songs, but actually like they're still pretty good. Like the singing is still like really great on those songs. And then of course you have Used to Know Me, which was one of my top 5 most played songs of the year on Spotify. The flip of Robin S's Show Me Love, obviously an incredibly storied sample, but
Mhm.
man, like when Charlie does it, it's a damn banger. And I think it says a lot that you can stand out at a Show Me Love sample in a year where Beyonce very famously also did the same thing
Mhm.
with Break My Soul. So yeah, man, Charlie XCX Crash, number 8. And yeah, didn't know if it was going to get here because I'm a big Charlie fan, but I still have high expectations for her. But yeah, I just think overall I still have really positive feelings about the album.
I was wondering if this was going to make your list. As I was going through, it was one that I didn't find myself going back to all that often, especially compared to some of Charlie's other stuff. But I knew how much you loved it. I knew that you saw the tour, so I'm glad that you talked about it. And definitely, it feels like every time she puts something out, there's something worth talking about with it, which is why she's such a great artist.
Mhm.
Let's keep it moving though to my number 8 of this year, which is the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Cool It Down. Back to
Wow,
back female led
nice.
rock bands on my list. But the AAS hadn't released an album in 9 years. And they come back with an album that is fully formed, completely sounds like they're reinvigorated, but also still true to who they've been as a band all along. We talked about the AAS twice this year, not only with this album, but also talking about "Meet Me in the Bathroom" documentary that came out a few weeks ago. Um, and Karen O, she's just still fucking has it, man. Like right off the bat, the song with Perfume Genius. spitting off the edge of the world. My apologies. And then Love Bomb, Wolf, Into Fleas, like Into Burning, like those first 5 songs just absolutely rip. Blacktop is this like very like introspective and like reflective song from Karen O, and then you kind of finish out strong with Different Today and Mars. It's only 32 minutes. It's only 8 songs, and it is just excellent from start to finish. Can't recommend this highly enough. Did you even think about this one for your list? I know you liked it.
No, I did like it, but no, I didn't really think about it. Um, Shout the yeah, shout out Karen O. Really cool comeback. See it so confident, so successful. An album they really threw together in a short amount of time as well. We just talked about the New York rock scene documentary "Meet Me in the Bathroom," which features the Yeahs extensively. And while we were not fans of the quality of that doc, I think the legacy of Yeahs is still going strong, which is a good feeling.
Absolutely. Dave, let's keep it going. What's next on your list?
Yes, next on my list, number 7 would be Brent Faiyaz, "Wasteland," the
I knew
king of
you
male
loved Brent this
R&B,
year.
my guy. And the thing is, I was like, huh, I did have Brent on my songs list last year with Gravity. At the time, was just a loose single, number 2 on my list last year. Turns out it was actually the very, very lead single to this album, Wasteland, an album that went number 1 despite Brent's status as an independent artist. Very cool to see. I think for me, just like R&B music, especially on the male side of things these days, it it can sound samey to me quite often, and I think the reason I've gravitated towards Brent the past few years is his artistic vision in the R&B space is just like so evident and it feels like so much beyond his peers, especially on the male side, and that just really like levels him above like his competition to me. I think in this his case, it's much more of a more toxic side of R&B and the lyrical side of things, but like thought the skits on this album were incredibly compelling. His singing too, like I think people know this from like the Baby Keem feature, for example. But like, there's an infectiousness to the way he sings that can like feel incredibly catchy, even when he's not trying to make catchy music, which I think goes a long way. It just kind of speaks to how he sounds. And one of the biggest like moments of like euphoria to me with music this year would be on Price of Fame off this album, where the song starts out with Brent vocally pitched way up, and then there's a beat flip about 90 seconds in, and Brent's vocals get pitched back down all the way to his actual normal voice, but the production also follows suit. And it was just kind of like a mind blowing, like studio magic type thing to me. Really love that. And just in general, I think his singing, his lyrical vision, just really compelling to me. It's a long record, probably too long, but overall, I can't help but just be a huge fan of his, and like I just don't like see like any like comparable peer on the male side of R&B right now. Like he's just running the show.
I knew that you loved this Brent Faiyaz album. I'm glad to see it on your list. Definitely worth talking about. Didn't make my list, but when I saw it, I was like, it's a worthy album for sure. Well, I'm going to keep it moving to my next album. So I talked about Sudan Archives already as my number 7 when you
Mhm.
had her at number 9. Do you want to do your number 7?
My number 7 was Brent, so go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I'll move forward to number 6 then for me, which is Black Country New Road, Ants from Up There. Uh, you know,
R.I.P. Man.
yeah, well, it's interesting because the band continues, but Isaac Wood does not, at least for now. The door is open for a return, which I hope happens. But listening to this album when we did, and we knew that he was leaving, I think they announced it shortly after, or maybe even like right before the album came out.
Yeah,
But
right
just
before.
listening to it further and knowing that this is actually like they're moving forward in a different space. They've talked about doing like film scores for their next album, so they're always doing something new. This album just feels so like melancholy in a sense. A lot of the brass and the horn section on this just feels so almost like grieving in a way. But man, the album from start to finish just grabs you and takes you along for this really wonderful ride. And whether it's a song like Concord, which is a little bit more of like a classic sounding, whatever this baroque rock sound, or if it's a song like Goodwill Hunting, which is a little bit more like twindly and spindly in terms of its sound. They just always make it work, and they build in these flourishes that you're just like, I did not expect them to go there, but you really love it. And I think this was a big step forward for the group, and I was really excited to hear it. And now I'm just wondering what they'll be. I'm sure it will still be something interesting. I just don't know if we'll like it as much without Wood at the center of it. So I wanted to talk about them and give them some props. That whole scene, as we were talking about
Mhm.
Call Me in the Bathroom a few weeks ago, I was thinking like, what would be like the scene people are talking about
Yeah,
now for rock?
British
And
post punk,
yeah,
man,
it's really
for
it.
sure.
It's
Yeah.
really it. Um, so yeah, Ants from Up There, my number 6 of the year. Dave, what's next for you?
Yep. So number 6 for me would be Kung Fu Kenny himself, Kendrick Lamar, Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers.
Just missed my list.
Yeah. Last time around, Kendrick was number 1 on my list with Damn way back in 2017. Now,
Those were the
this is an
days.
album that I didn't revisit as much as I was expecting to. That's why it's a little further down the list, but I really couldn't keep Kendrick off the list entirely because I just have a lot of admiration for the kind of album this is. We talked about this album extensively when it came out. We talked about it again when we did our Kendrick Lamar album rankings. But once again, to reiterate, I think Kendrick's decision to openly like bare his soul and be as inward looking publicly as he's ever been before on a record goes a long way for me, especially because when he peels back the curtain, when he, you know, cuts the onion a little bit, he shows that he is perhaps more of a prickly and less likable person than you might think. And he's aware of that himself, and he wants to share that with everyone else in his music. And I just find that incredibly admirable. And, only so many artists could find a way to do that and make
Mhm.
that compelling. And, I mean, there's there's so many lines to dissect whether you like what he's saying or not. And again, we went into this before, but um, I think just overall, I have a lot of admiration for like the goals of this album. Even if stuff like "We Cry Together" with Taylor Page, not something I ever want to hear again. You know,
Oh, you
but
don't?
in other moments, like "Mother I Sober," for example, it's incredibly illuminating. You know, it doesn't quite have the breadth of re-listenable bangers the way we thought on his much more mainstream and conventionally appealing Damn, but you still have Die Hard with Blast, which I think is great. N95 is a
Mhm.
banger in the vein of DNA. And of course, Father Time has an amazing Sampha feature. Sampha's had a
Yeah.
few great features this year. We're really hoping for a new Sampha record. The Ghostface verse on Purple Hearts is awesome. Not that I want want to admit it, but even Kodak Black was pretty good on Silent Hill.
Yeah.
Hard Part 5, another great entry in the Heart series. I think it's really hard for Kendrick to give you something that just doesn't have so much going on and so many ways to find compelling that even when he releases an album that is not conventionally appealing to the masses, there's still so much to dig into. So yeah, Kendrick for me, number 6.
Great choice. Great choice. Dave, I'm just going to let you keep it rolling to your number 5. We got a little bit out of order. I think your number
Yeah.
5 we actually talked about, though, right?
My number 5 is Pusha. Yeah.
Push it. Okay, so I'll keep it going to mine, which is Spoon, Lucifer on the sofa. And it's funny to have Black Country New Road and Spoon back to back on my best album rankings because two, I think, really great rock groups with completely different rock styles. That post punk, very loose, very interpretive vibe of the Ants from Up There is completely the opposite of Lucifer on the Sofa, and Spoon in general as a band is just completely tight and well rehearsed, and just everything is planned out perfectly, and that comes through so clearly on Lucifer on the Sofa. And Spoon as a group, it's funny because they really like broke through in the 2000s, even the late 90s for some of their early stuff, but they have just somehow found this way to like continue making really compelling, really interesting, and just well crafted albums. From They Want My Soul in 2014, one of my favorite albums from that year, and a really well reviewed album, to Lucifer on the Sofa, which is completely the opposite of that, and just completely back to their roots with these hard guitars, this like very almost like funky these licks all throughout, whether it's on Held, that like opening guitar that just kind of pulls you in and kind of keeps you throughout, to the Hardest Cut, which is more like driving and like really rock feeling, to something later on like On the Radio, which is a little bit more poppy and fun. They really just delivered completely on this, and one of my favorite albums from earlier in the year dropped beginning of February. So lasted all throughout the year for me, and Spoon, just one of my favorite bands, and if you can see them live, highly recommend it. What's next for you, Dave?
Yep, number 4 for me, Love Cost But the Game Free, Vince Staples, Ramona Park Broke My Heart. Man, this was an album that I was so happy that it was what it was, because less than a year prior to this album coming out earlier this year, we got Vince Staples' self-titled album. And that was an album that I think conceptually was really interesting, with Vince going down a more understated, mellower vocal performance lane. His flow is different, not what he had done in the past. And I think production wise, it just wasn't really engaging enough, at least not on like the level of other Vince works. And then he quickly follows that up, that feedback, quote unquote, with Ramona Park Broke My Heart, which takes this new side of Vince as a performer, but just matches it with leagues better production, led
Hmm.
by people such as DJ Mustard, who was on 2 of these songs. And I think hearing Vince do perhaps a more melodic thing at times, it's actually kind of revelatory, because we know what he can give us lyrically. What he can find almost humorous ways to shed light on a really dark past that he had. Uh, and yet, when you hear it on, you know, Mustard Bounce on Magic, or Rose Street, or sorry, Bang That, it just sounds so good. You hear Vince on Lemonade with Ty Dolla Sign, where he's really kind of matching Ty
Hmm.
with that melodic performance. You know, I just really love this record, because I think it really showed that Vince wanted to take a creative step forward in terms of how he was as a rapper, and he was able to do that on, I guess, second time's the charm kind of deal. He's able to do that with, I think, a really compelling album with a lot of really memorable songs. I love Slide, I love Paper Cuts, I love DJ Quick. Um, yeah, Rose Street. I think it's great, and yeah, as high as possible on Vince these days.
Yeah, that really great album. Another one that just missed mine. I think we'll be talking about him again when we do our best songs list. A little sneak peek
Mm.
for you, so we'll get to that. I'm gonna keep it rolling to my number 4, Dave, which Sudan Archives absolutely put out one of the most unique and uh, indescribable albums of the year. Rosalia was right behind her, and I think even did
Hmm.
it better with how tight Moto Mami is,
Yeah,
because
number 3 for
this
me.
this album is just I listened to it again in preparation for this, and I was just blown away again at her ability to take all these different parts of herself, her Latin roots, take this hip hop and leaning sound, take this R&B leaning sound, put it all together and make these catchy songs. And I know very little Spanish, so I don't even know what she's saying a lot of time, and I'm just grooving along and find myself dancing to it. And she's just an amazing artist, and really love
Hmm.
this album. Why is it your number 3?
Oh yeah, I mean, same thing, right? Like, I didn't want to mention Rosalia before, but like the obvious comparison point with Student Archives was Rosalia
Yeah.
this year, and I mean, it was such a, I think, a revelatory album, because she just took such a like extended leap after having all this critical love and attention in 2018 with the last record came out. But to go from someone who's like, innovating on like Spanish flamenco music, which is not a, mainstream genre by any means, to continue doing that, but also just bring in so much more Latin pop and reggaeton and dembo and all these other sounds and genres, and give you this, I think, incredibly compelling vision for its vastness, and she's able to do it all the entire time. I think it was a really fulfilling thing for anyone who'd been paying attention to her as an artist for some time, where there was starting to maybe creep in some doubt about whether she would just kind of go down the conventional side of things after she made that like random single with J Balvin, for example. It's like, like we think there's more with Rosalia. Are we going to get it after El Mal Carrer? And we did with Moto Mami. And then on top of that, she releases a loose song, Despecha, which becomes
Mhm.
a huge TikTok hit, throws it on the deluxe for Moto Mami Plus. Why not?
What a beast.
Just a flex, honestly. um, yeah, I think it's just really tremendous. Definitely, you can make a case for it easily to be the best number one album of the year. I think for sure. Um, and I mean, I just remember like when I first heard it back in what was that April, March, end of March.
Mhm.
I mean, it was I think one of those like mind blowing things where it's like, wow, even if you're a Spanish speaker, you need to listen to this multiple times because there's just so much going on.
Yeah, it's funny because like probably one of my favorite like line deliveries is just how she says "you're cute," like, and you think about that compared to something like chicken teriyaki or La Fama, and it's just
Hmm.
like no song is like just like the other. There's through lines that tie them together, but she is just like so experimental and formless in terms of genre on this. And like you said, she's kind of pulling in all these other influences from her past work, but just completely leveling up. Really impressive album, and it just makes me really excited to see what's next for her. Also, great co-sign for her getting the weekend to come sing on a track with
Hmm.
her, which I thought was another strong one. La Fama completely nailed that one too. So Moto Mami, my number four, your number three. So that brings me to my number three album of the year, which is Surrender by Maggie
I
Rogers.
knew you'd
Anyone
have
that
this.
Yeah, anyone that listened to our review of this knew that I loved this album, and I'm just so excited because Maggie Rogers been a almost like anointed after everything with her at NYU with Pharrell playing the Alaska track,
Hmm.
and I felt like her in a past life it did okay, right, and then you had a couple of couple other songs come out, notes from the archive recordings, just like a couple other songs, but nothing I felt like had broken through as like, okay, Maggie's here, like this is who she can be as an artist. And she comes back after the pandemic, took some time to go get a degree in philosophy or I forgot what it is, something religion based. I think it was from Harvard or something like that. And she just completely leans into this 90s sound on this, and from it feels like biting off elements of Beck to elements of like Alanis Morissette. She brings her songwriting and song crafting and this more hardened rock sound, and it just completely works. Whether it's the first track, Overdrive, which feels like a almost like a postal service like track in some senses at times, to Horses, which is more like ballady and emotional, to I've Got a Friend, which is a complete acoustic song, but I think is really moving. Like she just nailed all the elements on this. My favorite track, which was one of the only songs I considered putting on a best song list as well, because I'm trying to vary it up, was Want Want, which I think is just a complete masterpiece of a song. So Maggie Rogers, she's here. Get used to it. Making fucking awesome
Hmm.
music. We're down to our top two, Dave. I wonder if we have the same top two. What's your number two?
My number two is the 1975 being funny in a foreign
Hell
language.
fucking yeah. My number
Okay,
two as
we have
well.
the same top two.
Yeah, we
We
do.
did not consult any of this, by the way.
No.
Yeah, man. I think it's less surprising that I have this here, but you have come a long way with our English rockers, Matty Healy and the boys. You've come a long way with this group.
Indeed.
Um, and I think a big part of that was accepting that they are a pop group first, not
Mhm.
the saviors of rock, as people were saying in 2018.
Right.
And once you let that go, I think you can just really let loose with the just absurd lyrics that these guys do all the time. Maddie's one
Woman,
of the
you
most
are
compelling
64.
Maddie's one of the most compelling frontmen and vocalists like in pop to me. Like he's just so funny. He's polarizing, he's controversial, he's all those things, and he knows he's all those things. He talks about it in his music, you know? It is so fucking good. You know, woman, you are 64 years old. Man, I love this record.
Yeah, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. You know, for me as someone that has, eh, I think they've slowly grown on me. You know, there's been songs and tracks that I've really liked. This was probably the first album that start to finish I was just completely blown away by, and not only by like how like snappy and poppy these songs are, and they really just grab you right from the get go on this album, but just how like you said, Maddie really infuses so much of his personality in here, but in such a way that doesn't feel like some of the other albums where it felt a little bloated or meandering or listless at times. Like this is just tight. And one of my favorite tracks on this isn't even one of the more popular ones. It's About You,
Hmm.
which is the
Right.
second to
Yeah.
last track. But I just think it's like a completely beautiful, like heart achy love song. And whether he's delivering these like this lower register on that with I forgot who he's duetting on that song, but it's just a beautiful combination to a song like I'm in Love with You, which is so like poppy and fun. I think you were a big fan of Oh Caroline, right? If I remember
Uh,
correctly.
my favorite song is Part of the Band,
Hmm.
for sure. Which I think says a lot because normally I'm not a fan of like slower, softer stuff usually, but I'm just so compelled by I think both the songwriting of this group and just Maddie's vocal performance. Like I just find him very engaging. Love Part of the Band. I love Happiness. I love
Hmm.
Wintering. Uh, you know, it even has like a funny outro. You know, Central Park is SeaWorld for trees or whatever the
Yeah.
fuck he says. You know, just so much fun to revisit. I think it's such a clear step forward from the 2020 album Notes on a Conditional Form, and yeah, man, people shit on Jack Antonoff, us included, often, but sometimes that guy
Sometimes he
knows what to
hits.
do.
Yeah, man. I mean, we Midnight's not going to make either one of our lists, but another album that we felt like Jack really delivered on this year as well. And you know, the fact Taylor's still making a compelling album like that this far into her career is really impressive. What was that line? I take my coffee like I take my men,
Oh
full of
yeah,
soy, and you know,
oh yeah,
so
that's a
so
great line.
sweet that they can't like be offended or something like that.
Yeah, can't don't offend anybody or something.
Yeah, it's something
Yeah,
ridiculous.
but that's the thing. He can so convincingly, so authentically communicate these ridiculous one-liners, you know,
Hmm.
and that's just I think such an appeal of Maddie as a performer to me. Um, yeah, man. I mean, I never expected to have like 1975 so high in the list, but I just thought as soon as I heard this fall, I was like, yeah, it's like undeniable, like how great this one was.
Yeah. Yeah, the fact that it's my number two, I think, speaks to that because
Oh yeah,
I'd find any reason not to put him up there. But like you said, that means we have the same number one. Dave, what is it?
Beyonce
Yep.
Renaissance. This was
Yeah.
a lock as soon as we heard Renaissance, uh, and that's because Renaissance really exceeded expectations. Beyonce sets a very high bar for herself, and yet she found a way, I think, to surprise and compel in many ways. Her first traditional album rollout in like 8 years, been a minute,
Mhm.
you know? And you know what? It was for good reason. And I think it's really funny to see like this record start to take off with some hits, you know, Cuff It, which was a song that we both loved as soon as we heard it, but took a little minute to become a TikTok hit, is a TikTok hit now, got the Grammy nom. Great. But this is an album that's so much more than like any one song, and that's why I don't have it on my song any of the songs on my songs list, but we have the album and album of the year because I think like the vision that Beyonce brought, where bringing you this really intentional dance and disco and ballroom record that is super loving and empathetic and supportive and indebted to like ballroom culture of the past, specifically queer dance
Mhm.
culture of the past, which has been a big part of Beyonce growing her star and a big part of her continued success. And see like Beyonce pay that forward with such a cohesive, really thoughtful and genuine attempt at a completely new genre for Beyonce. That's
Mhm.
what like really like nailed it home for me. You know, Drake, honestly, never mind. We commend the attempt, Drake trying to do something new, you know, Jersey Club. Great. He just didn't deliver lyrically or vocally on that. At least he tried something. But Beyonce completely nailed something completely new, and it doesn't come across as like carpetbaggery in any way.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if there's much more I can say about it. I think you nailed it. It's just like, you go, you turn this album on, you're like, okay, we're gonna get, it's Beyonce. You know, you're gonna get something good, like you said. But she's really that like A+ student that got like instead of 100 on a test, like 105 because the teacher was just like, you did so fucking good. It's really nuts to kind of just run through and be like, Alien Superstar, amazing song. Cuff It, amazing song. Break My Soul, like one of the biggest pop hits of the year. Plastic Off the Sofa, Virgo's Groove, like it's just fucking hit after hit. And the way that it's crafted, it's like you're almost listening to like a power hour or something like that. Or like
Mhm.
it really feels like you're at a club in some ways. The way that this is just from start to finish, driving you throughout, bringing you through Beyonce's emotions. And in a lot of ways, it almost feels, and I hesitate to say like a post-pandemic album because we still are very much in a pandemic, but it feels almost like this like ability to like celebrate something new. And it's just like a testament to Beyonce and the hold that she has on the culture, that she just like drops an album and people are like, okay, Beyonce dropped an album, like pandemic is over, let's go fucking celebrate, let's get to the club and listen to this music. And she just fucking does that, man. It's great. Yeah, renaissance, truly a renaissance for Beyonce, which she didn't need, but she can do.
Yep. Hats off to her.
Absolute queen. Before we wrap up our album segment, Dave, what were some of the albums that disappointed you this year?
Yeah. Great question. There are always disappointments. Not that we want to talk about stuff we didn't like necessarily, but it's more about not meeting those expectations. And for me, there are several high profile candidates for most disappointing album of 2022. I'm not going to rank them, but I think for me personally, Charlie Puth's Charlie was a gigantic disappointment given the hype I had leading up, the long wait since Voice Notes in 2018, the fact that Voice Notes was so great. And Charlie, I think, just really did not compel vocally with the production choices, left a lot to be desired. There were a few moments of brilliance, like Charlie Be Quiet, but overall, it was just an album that I was really excited about, especially because he was seemed to be really in his groove, in his bag, being on TikTok, showing his creative process, and being like, "It's pretty cool, right? Look, watch this hook I just made. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is sticky as fuck. You know it is. I know it
Mhm.
is. I'm like a classically trained musician, and yet the album just really fell flat for me, which sucks.
Yeah, Charlie made my list as well. Another one that I had on here, which is probably my biggest disappointment of the year, but just this person in general is a complete disappointment to humanity at the moment. Kanye West, Donda 2.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
this
the
is
worst
number
album
one,
of
I
the year.
think, if you're ranking.
Yeah, like for maybe just the worst album that came out this year, period. Just not well produced, not well thought out. Um, the verses are absolute shit. There's just nothing to like about this.
Unfinished.
Yep.
There's the Migos feature was pretty fun. That's like the only thing I liked about it. You
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, not nothing else there. I also had Soccer Mommy, Sometimes Forever. I wouldn't say it's a bad album, but just one that after some of the other songs like Circling the Drain, things like that, you kind of hope Soccer Mommy's gonna make something a little bit more fully formed, and just didn't totally grab me the way I was hoping. Anything
Yep.
else stand out for you?
Yeah, I have a few others. How about Corday earlier in the year?
I wasn't as low on that as you were.
Yeah, it's again that's it's like Soccer Mom. Not that it was bad. I just
Mhm.
kind of wanted maybe something a little different.
Yeah.
So maybe
Yep.
something that's a little bigger. Same thought, right? Rina Sawayama, Hold the Girl, Burna
I
Boy,
was I
Love
was
Demeaney.
wondering if you were gonna put Rena on here because you just saw her live and said that the music
Right.
hit a little different for you.
It did, and I think these are like light, like they're just like I don't even know if disappointment's the right term, or it's more like I just didn't quite like this as much as the last album. Maybe it was a slightly different
Mm,
direction.
yep.
It's not bad. It's actually good. It is good. We talked about why it was good at the time, but I think it's just like a slight tweak. Like Burna Boy, Love Demeaney,
Mhm.
still really compelling Afrobeat album. Just wasn't quite as great as Twice as Tall as all. And I think as a listener, you have to perhaps try and remove those biases as best you can, so you can appreciate what you actually are listening to in the moment. And I try and do that as much as I can. Uh, Also, Christine the Queens, which we just got, Red Car. Um, I don't know if it was necessarily bad. It didn't really engage me the way I was hoping
Yeah.
to after really getting invested in her a few years back.
I put
And then
her and
I
Perfume Genius in the same category with that, where it's like it's not bad, but like, did I like it? Not that much.
Yeah. And then I think lastly would just be Drake would honestly never mind. Again, I think it's kind of a light asterisk because I didn't have any expectations or hype for Drake Jersey Club dance record. We didn't even know it was coming out, you know? But
Hmm.
then when you hear it, it's like, ah, man, like, great idea. Doing something new. Really cool. You know, it's Drake not doing something safe for the first time in a while. That's
Hmm.
awesome. But he just didn't deliver, I think, vocally or songwriting wise with much consistency. And that's why it comes up short. And that was the case even before we heard the Beyonce record, which obviously blows it away. So
Yeah,
yeah,
really tough for Drake to like take this risk to try something new and then just have Beyonce like a few a few weeks later just completely destroy him. One that we didn't mention that I definitely want to say is disappointing just because also f this person, MIA, dropping an album for the first time in a
forgot.
while, and that
Yep,
album fucking sucked. So
yep.
done with
Another one where
MIA
you
for
have
right
all
now.
this, you have this long wait to anticipation, artist with a storied career for being a innovator, and it just kind of feels like everything's passed her by.
She
You know,
literally
it's
made a song that sounded like her biggest hit, but just like worse. Like it's just kind of incredible to just like bite off your own stuff and not even improve it in any way.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, any others you wanted to shout out?
I think that's really it, and I think it's a lot of big people, a lot of people
Yeah,
we had expectations on, and there's obviously a spectrum, as we just said, to what a disappointment means with this kind of thing. But yeah, I think some of these people will bounce back, some of them maybe not so much. Kanye, MIA, not too sure.
and before we wrap up, I jumped the gun a little bit. Were there any albums that you wanted to shout out that we didn't make our list, but we really liked?
Yeah, totally. You had Maggie Rogers, that was honorable mention for
Hell
me.
yeah.
Freddie Gibbs, sold separately, another great
Hmm.
Freddie record, like that one. Jid's Forever Story, honorable mention for me. Black Thought and Danger Mouse, Cheat Codes, Drake and 21 Savage. I don't have Her Loss on my albums list. I don't have a Her Loss song on my songs list, but I really love like 7 songs on that album. Um, really, just really been feeling the fall for me. Uh, Also, FKA Twigs, Capri songs
Yeah.
as well.
You mentioned a lot of them for me, and a lot of the ones that you had on your list also made my I did like a top 20, but
Mhm.
The Family from Brockhampton was one I wanted to shout
Yep,
out.
good
Really
one.
liked that. I think I might talk about that in a little bit. I really liked Wayest Blood's and In the Darkness Hearts Aglow,
All right.
artist that I
Surprised that didn't make your list. I thought that one was happening. Maybe.
yeah, in terms of like all, I had a lot of rock on my list. It just didn't hit the same as some of those other albums for me.
Mm.
Um, Pink Venom by Blackpink.
Born Pink, you mean?
Yeah, Born Pink. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
Man, I might just spoil something there. But Born Pink definitely a album that I think I knocked only for the shortness, and that's kind of a hard part about the K-pop is like it's going up against these like longer albums, and it's like, oh, it's only 6 songs. What am I supposed to really make of this in terms of fully
Hmm.
formed albums?
Yep.
Still, like four bangers on that, like just really impressive. Um, yeah, I mean the Steve Lacy album,
Yep.
the Weekend, Dawn FM. I really liked. We did our
Yep.
rankings this year. Check that out. And then Cheat Code, Danger Mouse and Black Thought.
Yep.
Really enjoyed
Oh,
that one as
we
well.
should probably mention Bad Bunny as well. Biggest
Yeah.
album of the year. Didn't make my list, but definitely an honorable mention. I think a big part of that is like not to like just immediately put like the two big Spanish records against each other, but like the Rosalia album I think
Yeah.
really compelled me for its vision and its cohesiveness, whereas the Bunny album I think obviously compelled the world for its massiveness. I
Mhm.
think there's two different appeals, and obviously they're quite different in terms of the actual music as well. Um, so Bunny didn't make my list, but he made all the year end streaming lists, so he's still a big winner. Duh.
Yeah, I completely. I think you said it perfectly for me. And then Earl Sweatshirt made
Oh
an
yeah,
album that was pretty good.
good Earl record. Yes, it
Yeah.
was.
So that was early in the year. Anyways, we're gonna wrap up our albums there. We'll be moving on to our best songs of the year. So check that out in the comment in the link below, the description below, and we'll see you in a little bit.